Then there's the social media piece. About halfway through the book, social media suddenly appears. You know, there was the web, and we were onto the web quite quickly on The Guardian, and there'd been an awful lot of confusion. I described, as Warren's here, I described going to the New York Times in 1993 to find the internet. And I went to the New York Times, and the New York Times at that point thought that news would never be a thing on the net. They just couldn't imagine it. So they had a little unit that was doing sort of arts reviews and restaurant recommendations, and the guy who was in charge of it at the time said, news is never going to work on the internet. So nobody had a clue what we were doing, but nevertheless we got to about 2008 and we thought, that's it, we've done that. We're getting to much bigger audiences. The Guardian suddenly found all these readers in America, we thought we'd sort of begun to crack it. And then my colleague Emily Bell, who's now at Columbia, who was my digital director at the time, came in and said, there's this thing called Web 2.0. And she said, you should have a look at Twitter. And I looked at Twitter, and she said, this is going to be the biggest news organization in the world. And I said, get out of here, Emily. This is a lot of people saying what they had for breakfast. You know, I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see Facebook. And what she was saying is that society is rearranging itself on a horizontal level, and we ought to sit up and pay attention. That was a very hard thing from people who'd grown up with the printing press. It just seemed wrong on every level. And increasingly you see people who think that. You know, they still think it. They think it more entrenched way. You read it in lots of newspapers, you know, that this was a utopian vision about what the internet could be, and how sad it all went wrong, and we must stop it. But that's not my experience of social media. So if I've described to you what I thought about Brexit and climate change in much of the traditional media, I find the opposite on social media. I find very engaged people who know what they're talking about, really real experts. And I find the tone of the dialogue really agreeable. This is not when I was editing. I used to hate it when I was editing because people were very rude to me. But now nobody knows who I am. I sit there and I find intelligent people talking in an intelligent way. I find they listen to each other. They respond to each other. They don't say, trust me because I work for The Guardian. They say, trust me because I'm about to give you the evidence. Here's a link. Here's a screenshot. If you think Twitter is 280 characters long, it is, but people have constructed a new form of engagement, which is to do a thread. So you can do 20 things, each with its own bit of evidence, and each contestable and arguable and respondable to. That's very different from the tablet of stone model. And it's sometimes uncomfortable. Falsehood on the significant issues of the day, I find, doesn't last very long, because there will always be somebody who will challenge something within minutes, if not within seconds, as opposed to newspapers and their antiquated correction models. So I think there's a lot going on in social media. And a difficult thing to measure trust, but people obviously do, in some sense, trust this ability to have what are, in some senses, conversations with people who seem to know what they're talking about, and to be able to challenge them and to respond to them. So I think one thing that newspapers might do is to think about social media and think about, well, if that is the predominant direction of communication in our age, let's think about how people talk and respond and listen as a method of getting at the truth, rather than just saying, here's the truth, take my word for it, because people don't seem inclined to do that any longer on the vertical axis. I'm not sure, some journalists agree with that. I'm not sure all the journalists agree with that. Again, it's almost like the pendulum has swung back in the first 5 minutes of the internet, and journalists are saying, well, we tried that, didn't work. The number of newspapers are now turning comments off under articles and basically saying our readers are morons, we hadn't realized. We gave them this chance to comment, and have you read them? They're appalling people. So if they want to go and have their appalling conversations over there, that's fine. But we're not going to talk with them. So it's a difficult thing. I'm quite relieved not to. I did it for 20 years, and I'm quite relieved. These are very difficult issues to solve. Zuckerberg's problem in solving the problems he's got, I wouldn't envy him, and yet the sort of anger that's being, and you know, they've made terrible mistakes, and they're arrogant. I wish they'd pay more tax and all of that. But nevertheless, to be asking Mark Zuckerberg to solve all these problems by next Monday, it seems to me unfair. You know, the world has never seen the capability that he's created. In the taxi on the way here, there's a very good media commentator called Frederick Filou who publishes a Monday note each day. And he was just publishing about something about how Facebook is to blame for the riots that are going on in Paris at the moment. And that seems to be a misreading of what Facebook is. You know, Facebook is allowing people to communicate very efficiently, horizontally, and I bet WhatsApp is doing the same. But they're not causing the riots. They are enabling people who feel discontent, rightly or wrongly, about the economic system that they live under to communicate. And you could argue that's a good thing, that people should be able to have, people who had never been able previously in history to have a voice, to have that voice.